Hey neighbor, let's talk about growing transplants, growing your own plants for your garden. I'm going to talk today how I'm successful growing my own plants, maybe give you some of the details I've not given you before, and also, can you grow these organically? Hey, let's dig into it. Okay, before we get into the details, let's just cover a couple of the bases here. We need to use good seed starting medium or soil. You don't want to use native soil out of your yard. Look here, we have this happen all the time. People will send us emails in, they've dug dirt or soil out of the garden and put it into our seed start stuff. Don't do that. Use a good seed start mix. Don't use pot mix from the big box store. It's got a bunch of pine bark in it. You want to use a good peat, perlite, vermiculite, or some type of good seed start mix. All right. After that, you got to make sure that you use a good tray. Some people love to use these pie pans and stuff, solo cups or whatever. Hey, sometimes they work. The main thing is use a plant tray that is designed for growing seedlings. And one of the main things is drainage. See that hole right there? We want good drainage so our water doesn't sit in our plants drain well, something that's designed to grow good quality plants. All right, folks, we got some jambalaya okra here that I planted because I like to transplant my okra. My very first setting of okra, I like to transplant it because my soil is cool and I can grow them in the greenhouse. But anyway, we've got okra here. It's starting to put on true leaves. You see those first two leaves right there? We don't consider those true leaves, but when that one right there starts peeking its head out there, that is what we consider a true leaf. Now it's time to start feeding this plant. And this tool right here is the one that helps me do that, hose siphon mixer. I'm gonna show you how we hook it up and how we also use a watering wand to get our fertilizer into our plants so they can grow off nice and healthy. So this is one I've had in my greenhouse for a couple years now, and I hook my hose siphon mixer right there at my spigot when I go down into my water hose there that goes to my watering wand. And you see this thing right here, you just have to take this hose and stick it on there. It takes just a minute or two to put this thing together. And you got this little spring at the bottom of the hose. Now this thing serves two different purposes. Enough weight on that to hold it into the bottom of your bucket. Also, that little screen there keeps some of your trash from coming through going to your hose siphon mixer. The way I do it in my greenhouse is I keep two containers or two buckets right here close to my hose siphon mixer. One of them is just plain water, and the other one is the one I keep my fertilizer mixed in. And the reason I do this, I may have some plants that needs different amounts of fertilizer, or I may not want a fertilizer that particular day. So I can just simply take this hose out and move it in between buckets if I want to fertilize or if I don't want to fertilize. All right, so the pickup tube here always needs to be in some type of solution, whether it be regular water or fertilizer. The reason is if it's not, then it's going to suck air through the pickup line and you're going to get that air coming through your drum or your hose nozzle there, and you're going to have problems. So you always want this in solution, whether it be regular water or fertilizer. If you ever hear that popping noise coming out your nozzle, you know you've run out of water. You need to put more regular water in your bucket there. First of all, let's understand that the hose siphon mixer has a pickup ratio of 16:1. Now this is preset, we cannot change that. It will only do a 16:1 pickup. And what that means is for every 16 gallons that runs through our hose siphon mixer, it is going to pick up 1 gallon through this spring right here, through our pickup tube of solution, whether it be regular water or whether it be fertilizer, to mix in to that 16 gallons. So that's 1 gallon of solution we pick up to mix in to 16 gallons that goes through our hose siphon mixer and eventually out our nozzle. So periodically, I'll just keep water in my regular water bucket there. Try to keep it as clean as possible, but you know, it's in the greenhouse, gonna get a little bit of dirt in there. It's normally okay. So my fertilizer container that I have next to it right here, I'm going to show you the ratios that I use for my greenhouse growing with our 20-20-20 fertilizer. Now, you can do this a couple different ways. If you have trouble with this water-soluble fertilizer mixing, you can use warm type water, or you can just use regular cold water and kind of stir it around. But I'm going to show you the ratio that I use when I mix up to fertilize my plants. All right, folks, this is the secret sauce here for me for growing out good quality plants. 20-20-20 water-soluble premium fertilizer. This water-soluble product right here has been known for years as Miracle Grow, and they named it properly. It is some miracle stuff right here. Now, one reason that this product works so well is because of the nitrogen source. So it has 3 different types of nitrogens in this one product here: ammoniacal, nitrate, and urea. Now, this is something we very seldom see in other fertilizers. Those 3 different types of nitrogens, the plant responds to them differently. So when you put all 3 of them in there, you're feeding this plant a hodgepodge of different nitrogens that respond to the plant and are available to that plant, and gets that plant grow. And I think that's one of the main benefits of this product right here, is those 3 different types of nitrogens. This stuff here works wonderful in the greenhouse, also works good in the garden, but I think it works probably best in the greenhouse because we're putting into a sterile mix of our potting soil 20% nitrogen, 20% phosphorus, and 20% potassium to get those plants up and going. If there's one product that you want to use in the greenhouse, it's this one right here. All right, so I'll show you my little secrets right here. You see this right here? This is a 4-ounce container. I normally level it up even right there, and I put it in my fertilizer container. Let me get this out of the way. And I mix this up, and I stir it around. I keep stirring it around there. Now, I normally fill this up to about a 4-gallon. If you're using a 5-gallon bucket, try to put about 4 gallons in here. This container right here may be just a little bit bigger than that, so we're going to try to get about 4 gallons in here. Now, this is the recipe I use when I first start fertilizing my plants, because when my plants are young and small, I have to be really careful or I'm going to burn my plants. At this ratio right here, it seems to be perfect for me for my first fertilization for my plants to get them kicked off. As my plants get bigger, I can increase that. So I'm not going to bore you with the math here, but you can figure it out if you want to. We got 4 gallons of solution in this right here, and then we're going to pull this out at a 16-to-1 ratio. This gives you just a basis, a quick reference guide of what I do and what works for me. So I'm going to get this on up here probably just a little bit more, and then we're going to switch over, move our pickup tube into our fertilizer container. All right, so when I get ready to fertilize, I simply take this up, drop it in there. You're going to have to let it run just a minute for it to purge through the system there. It doesn't take long. All right, now I can start fertilizing my small plants. Now I just water them like I would normally water. Give them a good soak in there. Some plants are going to be able to take more fertility than others, but this is pretty much a general rule here on pretty much any plant that you can get started with. Now I will do this probably every 5 to 6 days. It really depends upon how hot it is, how fast my plants is growing, and that kind of stuff. If it's real cold and my plants are not growing very well, I may back it up and do it every 7 days. But if I'm really needing to push my plants and the weather's pretty warm, you can get by with doing this every 4 to 5 days. All right, as my plants get bigger, they're able to utilize more fertilizer without burning them. So what I would do at that point is I would double my solution in my fertilizer watering bucket from 4 ounces to 8 ounces. I would only use that on plants that are growing quickly or that are bigger. They're able to utilize that fertilizer without being burned. Definitely don't want to put that on those small seedlings with those white roots just coming out, because you can very easily get burned. But as these plants get bigger, they're able to utilize that fertilizer. So if I'm wanting to push a plant real quick, or if I'm watering mature plants in containers, you can definitely get by with 8 ounces in that 4-gallon solution. Now I keep that same schedule when I double up my fertilizer when I'm watering those larger plants, 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 days rotation of fertilizing. So I'll fertilize one day, one good watering, and I'll switch my hose back into my clean water. I do that according to how quick I want to push those plants, what the weather looks like. A general rule is 4 to 7 days apart, I will fertilize those larger plants. All right, so a dram watering wand is my preferred method of putting this out because it has a little extension on there and I can reach out and get the plants. But there's a little trick with these nozzles here. There's a lot of these nozzles available for these dram wands here. And the reason is they're easy to switch out, which is a benefit. But some of these work well with the hose siphon mixer and some of them do not. This is our bigger nozzle right here, puts out more water. It's probably a little bit softer, but it does not work well for the hose siphon mixer. The reason is the hose siphon mixer restricts a little bit of that water, and we don't have enough volume for this to work correctly, and I'll show you why. See there's just not a volume coming out there to make that nozzle work just right. It's really making a mess. All that water's coming out, not very soft at all, and it's going to splash around, not be very consistent. Now, if I'm watering my raised beds in my garden and I'm not using the hose siphon mixer, hey, this is the nozzle I use. It works wonderful. But for the hose siphon mixer, we need this smaller nozzle right here to make it work correctly. Just screw it on there, and you will see this is the perfect nozzle. See there? Works wonderful putting out the fertilizer. The flow matches up the nozzle there perfectly. All right, there are a limitation to this hose end siphon mixer right there. And one of them is the length of hose you can go on the bottom side there. And that limitation is 50 feet. You cannot have a hose hooked on to this that is longer than 50 feet. If you do, this will not work properly there. I use a 25-foot hose because that's all I need in my greenhouse situation here. But just make sure that you don't go further than 50 feet with this hose here, or it will not work properly. Another thing too is when you don't need this, make sure you turn your water off. What will happen if you leave pressure on this hose siphon mixer, it will sometimes fill up water back through your pickup tube there. So if you're not using your hose siphon mixer, make sure you turn the pressure or the volume off so that it's not in use. Don't leave it on all the time. Just make sure you turn it off. My main 3 tools in the greenhouse for growing plants: hose siphon mixer, dram watering wand, and that 20-20-20. I don't use a lot of micro boost in the greenhouse as growing plants. You can, but I find it's really not needed that much. You need those 3 major elements to get those plants growing. We find that we need those minor elements more after they're transplanted out in the garden. Very seldom do I see a deficiency in my plants from a minor element when I'm growing plants. Nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus are the ones you really need to be concerned about, and that's the reason that 20-20-20 with that ammoniacal and that nitrate nitrogen works so well. All right, so let's talk about growing organically, and this is where it gets a little bit tough. A lot of people try to grow their plants organically. I do not, because the reason is those plants could care less where those nutrients come from, whether it's an organic source or a synthetic source, and I can get those synthetic fertilizers into that plant a lot quicker. And I'm not concerned about the health of my pot medium there because it's pretty much sterile to start with. So I don't really see the benefit of trying to use an organic fertilizer to grow starts. But let's just say that you do. Let's explain to you how I think I would go about doing that. First of all, you have to understand in the springtime when our weather is cool and we're trying to start plants, some of our fertilizers don't react the same way they do when it's in hot weather, specifically organic fertilizers. Now, if you're putting bone meal or blood meal or any of those organic fertilizers into your potting medium, they have a longer chain to release and they do not convert well in cool weather. That's the reason a lot of people have problems growing their plants off in this early spring when the weather is cool with these organic fertilizers. Now, there's only one out there that I know that I could use to get the nutrients to that plant quick, and it's just a nitrogen source that's going to be soluble. And that, folks, is going to be chelated nitrate. Chelated nitrate is an organic product, and it is a quick-acting nitrogen source that some of the organic growers use to get those nutrients or get that nitrogen to the plant quick. So that's definitely an option. I would use it the exact same way I use my 20-20-20. Mix it up in a bucket, pretty much use the same ratio. 4 ounces in 4 gallons of water when the plants are small, or go to 8 ounces to 4 gallons of water when those plants are on big. That's only going to give you a nitrogen source, which is really important, but you still got to worry about phosphorus and potassium. Now, if you use those organic fertilizers such as blood meal, bone meal, or any pretty much feather meal, any of those, they're going to give you those nutrients, but it's going to be really slow and it's going to be really inconsistent in the early spring. Now, if you're doing it in the hot summertime, it's a little bit different story. They're going to convert a lot quicker and those nutrients are going to be available to that plant a lot better. But most of us are growing our plants in the springtime, and that's where the problem comes in with that. So if you're growing organically, you're going to have time on your side. It's going to take you about twice as long to grow out a plant it is with me using the 20-20-20. But it is possible. Just make sure that you account for that additional time for that plant to not grow off near as quick, and plan on using something like the Chilean nitrate to give it that nitrogen when it needs it. So these tools I showed you today will work whether you're doing synthetic fertilizer or you're trying to grow organically. The dram watering wand, the whole siphon mixer, these nozzles are absolutely wonderful tools to use in the greenhouse with your seed starting. There's no greater joy to me than planting a seed and watching it come up and make a nice healthy plant. And that's what we're all after, is a nice healthy plant. Seed starting and being able to grow plants off is a wonderful skill set to have.